So today I wanted to make a video on how the hell we came to be in the world and why is the world the way that it is. So everything we'll be talking about today is based on non-dual principles. So if you don't know much about non-duality, then maybe this video isn't for you, and that's completely fine. But anyway, how did we come to be here? So this is you, and in reality, there is no container. So this is just for the sake of this poorly drawn diagram. So this is you, and you are inseparable to God. So God and you are one. This is why there is two lines. Some people call it the Christ. I mean, you can call it anything you want. That's why Jesus says, I and my Father are one and the same. So everywhere God is, which is everywhere, you are. Everything that God is, you are. So yeah, there's no separation whatsoever between you and God. And so that's who you are ultimately. Infinite, eternal, everything. Okay, now, so what happened was a part of you had the thought, which is the same thought that all of us have from time to time, which is, I don't need you at all. I can do it by myself. I'll do it my way. I'll find my own way to do it. And that's exactly what the larger you said. Part of you decided you wanted to do it yourself and create all by yourself and that it didn't need God. So it split apart itself off, and this is that self. And in splitting that part of itself off, because it was without its source, God, for the very first time, the absolute terror and the guilt was completely and utterly unbearable. And because of the weight of that terror and that guilt, that split you went completely unconscious because it was just way too much to handle. It was too much to bear, and rightfully so. Then what happened was that terror and that guilt has to go somewhere, and so it got projected into the ego. And so the ego is a creation of terror and guilt and self-hatred, and its only job is to keep you unconscious. And because its job is to keep that terror, guilt, and hatred away from you. So therefore, keeping you unconscious. But at the same time, so our source also, noticing that this was happening, sent in love. So this is where duality was born. And so this is where the birth of good and evil, right and wrong, the Garden of Eden story. So yeah, the birth of duality. And then, so then from this point here, the ego, noticing that it's still too close for comfort, essentially, and it doesn't want any of this terror, guilt, or whatever to be uncovered. So therefore, it fragmented itself into countless parts, and then the physical universe was created. So this is the Big Bang, and it was created for a way for the ego to essentially hide itself from itself into, countless separate parts. And so this is where we find ourselves now. But as you can see here, the ego and love are joined, but this part here is also completely unconscious. But this duality manifested itself into each and every fragment. So we all have, even though that love is who you are, it's yourself, and that is inside each of us. But yeah, that part of us in each fragment is completely unconscious, just like it's unconscious here. And so you can see that all of this is happening. So the physical universe, all of it, is happening inside of you, the unconscious you. And just as there is only one you, there is also only one ego. And now what you see happening in the world is this duality manifest. And as you can see in the world, through all of us and our individual egos, you can see that our ego is doing the same. It's keeping us from seeing who we really are. And so yeah, and so here we are in the world now, all of us individual fragments of this one ego. And remember as well that just like there is only one you, so one all of us, there's only one ego. So there's not multiple egos, there's only one ego which fragmented itself into all of us here in the world. And so here we are now in the world trying to remember who we are back here. But now the only way to get back here is to go through here, the ego. And this is where love comes into it. These have to merge, and the way that they merge, and the only way that they can merge, is by coming back from the individual self and by realizing, you don't go from being an individual fragment of the ego into realizing that you are the one. I mean, you can do that, but you're skipping steps, and you're always going to get pulled back into the ego that way. So the way to go about it is to realize that we're all one, we are all one, but we're also all one ego. And so that means that, as individual fragments of ego in the world, you cannot look at somebody else in the world, somebody that's doing something horrible or nasty or depraved or whatever, and say, oh, that person's horrible, that person's nasty. Because what happened here to create the ego? It got projected because of our inability to handle that terror and that guilt. And so see the same things happening for us as individual fragments. We look at somebody in the world doing something depraved and we're like, oh, that person's horrible and depraved. When what are we doing? The same thing, projecting. What's horrible and depraved is the terror and the guilt. Not that it really is, because obviously it never really happened and there's nothing to really feel fear and guilt for, but we don't know that yet. We're still unconscious. So the only way back is to feel all of that fear and guilt. And what we're all doing though in the world is these separate egos, is we're projecting that outwards. And so we're saying, oh, that person's bad, that person's horrible. You see it all the time. This is what everyone says, that person is such a horrible, depraved person. But by saying that somebody else is a horrible and depraved person, you're saying that you are a horrible and depraved person. And therefore, you're keeping yourself stuck in that unconscious fear and guilt. So what we should really be saying, if we look at somebody that we find horrible and depraved, and by all means, it absolutely is horrible and depraved, no one's denying that, but the trick is to not project it outwards, because what's horrible and depraved is inside each and every single one of us, because it's the same ego inside all of us. So the only way back is for each of us individual fragments to realize that that depravity and that hatred and that terror and the guilt, really everything, all the depravity really stems from guilt. The terror and the guilt that went unconscious here when we split off from our source. That's the cause of all the depravity, everything in our world. Absolutely all of it. We need to realize that inside of each of us as fragments lies the entire ego. And so if we want to make it back, we need to realize, it's not all love and light. The only way back is to face the unconscious terror and the unconscious guilt. And we do that through our experiences here as fragments in the world, by looking at the depravity in others. Or it's not even about that really. I mean, it's whatever triggers you in your experience. Because for certain people, certain things are going to be triggers, and for certain people they're not. Like, it's just the way it goes. So the way back to here is in your experience, feeling when something inside of you gets triggered and you start blaming another person or another thing and saying, oh, it's their fault, or it's the government's fault, or it's my partner's fault, or it's my parents' fault, or whatever it might be. No, it's not. It's your fault, because you split off and you have guilt and you have terror, and that's causing you to then attract these experiences in the world. And so then as fragments in the world, there's either two ways that a fragment will go about it. Either they want to be punished for splitting off from their source, and they want to be punished for their guilt, or they want to punish others for their guilt. But either way, everybody is doing the exact same thing in their own way, and everybody has that same unconscious terror and guilt, because we're all one ego. So the only way back is to recognize that we're all one ego, and we all have a shared purpose in that we all want to be back to who we are. And so the only way that we can do that is by recognizing that that terror and that guilt is in each of us, and to stop projecting and blaming others for it, and to start recognizing that it's in us and allowing ourselves to feel it, acknowledge it, become aware of it, become conscious of it. And by becoming conscious of it, the ego gets weakened. So the more that you recognize your own guilt and terror, the more that you're giving this the opportunity to come into your life, and you're giving this the power instead of the ego. And so the more that you give love the power over the ego, and the only way that we can give love power in our lives is by becoming less unconscious. And we become less unconscious by facing more of our terror and more of our guilt. And there is no way around that. And that is incredibly painful and difficult and hard. But the more we can learn to do that, the more closer we get to our split self, and the more our split self wakes up, and eventually we're back. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Yeah, if you've got any questions or whatever, chuck them in the comments. Yeah, that's about it. Have a good one.